Hi guys, welcome back to another tactics video for the 2 Plus podcast. So with the arrival of the new errata and match play changes, we're trying to keep content relevant, but some of this might have some of the idiosyncrasies and details might have existed before some of the recent changes. However, the big picture topic today, closing the door, is as important as ever in the new edition. And I want to go through a number of examples that are somewhat innocuous in this game, just part and parcel of playing, but created a series of cascading events that I would say led to me getting quite a strong victory in this game and somewhat not like an easy victory in the sense that weren't a lot of decisions to make. There weren't a lot of dice rolls to make that were sort of in the balance. And a lot of that was due to the positioning of units and how charges were dictated by that positioning. So, looking at this is me playing Beastman against a Dark Elf army. The battle report is up later in the week, the full battle report, that is. But on the second turn, I'm forced to push all my units forwards from the Herdstone, which I probably should have done straight away with these templates running around in the background. What ends up happening is create a facing where my Shaggoth is in front of my gigantic spawn, and the Razor Gores and the Tuskors are angled into the center of the board. Now that's important because when we talk about closing the door with close order units, the charging unit essentially has to align itself, or in better terms, maximize its alignment to the charge target. So it's going to take the shortest route after it can get one wheel to do so, and then it's going to with a free move, which is something we like on this channel or a great strategic resource, it's going to snap shut. So in alignment to that close order target. What that means over time on building on last week's videos is I wonder whether charging is as good as we might want it to be in the history of the game. Instead, you have a lot of opportunities to dictate how the battle will proceed from here. And I think Old World is proving to be more of a game for defense rather than offense. And we can talk about that more strategically later on in some of the chats Patty and I do. But it was revealing to me playing this tournament that there is a lot that the defender can do to sort of dictate the terms of the game. So what happens next is that my opponent charges. So the Doomfire Warlocks on the right have charged into this Razor Gore to make way for the Cold Ones, whose charge target is the Gigantic Spawn. What happens is they have to charge the Gigantic Spawn and they're going to hit it, but in trying to close the door to align with my base, they're going to make what they call accidental contact with the Shaggoth. Now, that means that the Cold One charge is now disrupted, so it would lose a rank bonus if it had one. But on top of that, the Cold Ones essentially are oriented to the facing or the angle of the facing that my Shaggoth has used. That is really good because what happens now is my Shaggoth was headed towards those executioners in the back, and it means that it still has an overrun path towards that unit because if it wins combat, it will be able to go straight ahead into the executioners. So while the cold ones are going to get to strike first, the repercussions are going to be dictated by the facing of the Shaggoth. So that's something you got to think about with your units is the way that you angle them when you finish your turn. So instead of say marching straight ahead, you might consider marching 12 and wheeling the final 2 inches, for example. And I think this is becoming more and more important about how you align your units, especially to receive charges, which I think has a lot of advantages, which I discussed in the last tactics video last week. So on my right as well, you can see the Dragon Ogres. The Dragon Ogres are a great sacrificial unit because their wounds are they take so much to kill with their 3+ armor save and sometimes 5+ ward. And having that many wounds each means that they're very difficult to wipe out in one go. Even with this Witch Elf unit, 30 Witch Elves bearing down on them. So I'm going to be able to charge the result of this combat. The cold ones win combat. There's damage all around, but the cold ones win. And luckily, the gigantic spawn is unbreakable, so it just gives ground, and the Shaggoth falls back in good order and is able to then charge back in next turn because the cold one unit is only able to come forward into the gigantic spawn. So that facing again, critical. You don't want them in one line. You want to stagger one to determine which of if a unit has to charge with its wide flank or wide rank, then staggering the units will create, if he wants to charge the unit in the front, then the unit in the front can fall back or give ground, and the unit on its side is going to collect that charge, and the other unit can come back in. So as long as you don't flee, you're in good trouble, in good hands. But Shaggoth Leadership 9, pretty good. So the Dragon Ogres, I tested this a few times, are in the flank of those cold ones, the bulk of their unit, and what that means is they can declare a charge and they're just wheeling straight away to get to that charge. So they wheel a tiny bit to make contact, and then the rest of the wheel is free in closing the door. So here they can move straight ahead, or I can wheel at any time to hit that point at the start. So when I wheel to make sure that the dragon is coming forward, although they got plenty move, the rest of the wheel is going to be free, and they're going to hit this unit at a perpendicular angle. What happens next is I wipe out the cold ones with the dragon ogres, the Shaggoth now on the charge. Elven Reflexes is gone, the gigantic spawn, it's a bloodbath. And I am able to then overrun with the Shaggoth, still with the same line, into pursuing, or pursuing, overrunning, getting straight, has to pursue straight ahead, so it's able to get into the executioners and preserve that combat. So even though it won't attack again this turn, it next turn, that unit is going to have to fight. What happens is you can see, and I've complained in the past about units getting tripping over one another, but to here it's my advantage. The spawn goes forward. Oh, the spawn is going to move out of the way, but these witch elves are going to hit the dragon ogres in the back. They're frenzied. I think they probably would like to anyway. The dragon ogres are then going to get destroyed. They're going to get wiped out. So the dragon ogres lose all. There's a a death hag with an ogre blade on the top. She makes short work of them actually. Don't even doesn't need the help from her sisters. And the dragon ogres are go wiped out. This is a frenzied unit, so the frenzied unit has to overrun. And you can see from here, while that dragon ogre move set an overrun path where the witch elves are now headed towards a board edge, and they're not going to be able to catch this gigantic spawn that I've just moved ever so slightly out of the way of the overrun path of those witch elves, so they're going to go straight past it because I would like to sort of spin around and come back into the middle with the gigantic spawn. The Tuskor chariot has also been left deliberately there as a sort of sacrifice, sadly, for the Tuskors. The witch elves are going to come forward. If they hit the Tuskor chariot, then they're going to get stuck again. And while the Tuskor is going to die, it's going to force another overrun. So because of that facing, like I could angle it outwards, I could angle it in, but the spawn causes a little bit of issues there. What happens is they're going to come forward, they're going to snap, and I've also got that herdstone in the back left that I'm trying to protect. So the best thing was for the witch elves to continue to go towards the board edge, which is what happened. So on the next turn, after they've come forward, the Tuskor dies, and the witch elves have overrun. They didn't go off the board, but fortunately for me, they then failed their restraint test, or the reform test at the end of the overrun, and that meant that they couldn't pivot to come to attack my herdstone. There were only going to be 2 turns left in the game after that. So what you can see throughout is positioning your units to change faces so that when a unit has to close the door, it's oriented to the way you want. What happens next is that you can use those free wheels as long as you're in the flank arc of the unit, and the new errata or the FAQ has improved that for this type of tactic where if you're a single unit model, you don't need to be, you can you look at like the overall majority of where the model is, not just a touch before you have to go into the front. So that Dragon Ogre maneuver meant that I then set an overrun path where when those witch elves hit and closed the door on the dragon ogres, they were now perpendicular and headed 90 degrees off the board. So it is quite abstract, and I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the abstract parts of the game, but this is a necessity to make the game work. And the more you play with close order units, it's not just chaff, but your anvil units that you need to be able to orient facing a particular direction. On top of that, you got to be very careful with your hammer units that you're getting in where you want in combats, because if you don't, then you're going to end up being led around the board, or you're going to miss particular combats because your front arc is no longer going to have line of sight to the things you'd like to charge. Thanks again, guys, for watching. We'll see you next time.